We are now ready to consider the third and next to last section on our current topic. This section contains an analysis of the advantages of the proposed system. It should be quite easy for all of us to understand that if the financial system were redesigned based on the three principles we have discussed, the following advantages would come into play. First, the proposed system prevents bank crises. Obviously, a system of private banks that operate with a 100% reserve ratio is immunized against bank crises. If people suddenly go to withdraw all their money deposited in the bank, there is no problem, since the money is there. As we have already seen, when the King of France attacked Holland, panic broke out, and people went en masse to the Bank of Amsterdam to withdraw their money. And because the Bank of Amsterdam maintained a 100% reserve ratio, the bank was able to return every last deposit, which enhanced its long-term prestige and solvency even further. Well, that is plain to see. However, the second advantage is even more considerable, namely that the proposed system prevents cyclical economic crises. Indeed, a banking system which rests on a 100% reserve ratio immunizes the market economy against economic crises. The phenomena of dual availability and the bank multiplier are no longer possible. Bankers can no longer lend out many times the amount deposited with them, and thus prompt entrepreneurs to hastily invest as if society's genuine prior saving had increased, when in fact it has not. Therefore, there can be no maladjustment, no systematic discoordination between investment and the behavior of economic agents with regard to consumption and saving. Only in a system with a 100% reserve requirement do financial intermediaries lend purely what economic agents have previously saved. Of course, as always, there will be entrepreneurial errors and companies that fail as a result. But we will avoid a situation in which all or most entrepreneurs are, to a greater or lesser extent, systematically deceived by artificially easy credit and prompted to undertake unviable investment projects in the medium and long term, thus transferring all kinds of economic resources, particularly labor, toward lines of production with a temporal, geographical, and praxeological distribution that does not correspond to consumers' true desires. And the market, which as you know is highly dynamically efficient and ends up uncovering these errors, reverses them in the form of an initial financial crisis and subsequent economic recession. With a 100% reserve requirement, saving and real investment would match up almost perfectly, and hence we would avoid the recurring malinvestment phenomena that ultimately trigger economic crises. Would all recessions and cycles be prevented? Well, practically all, since cycles would be conceivable only under very extreme circumstances. For instance, if suddenly, out of the blue, economic agents the world over decided to dramatically increase their time preference. Clearly, if, for whatever reason, we all decided to consume much more and save much less, we would leave up in the air many investment projects that require continuity and saving, and this would give rise to phenomena similar to those associated with a cycle. But these phenomena are imaginable only under very extreme conditions. For instance, a new world war that affected everyone, or even, who knows, a natural catastrophe, though natural catastrophes are limited geographically. Such disasters are followed by an outpouring of generosity, as we know. A natural disaster could cause economic strain and maladjustments. But today we live in a globalized world, and such events are geographically limited in scope. They are not at all likely to involve the entire planet. I suppose aliens could take over the world. In short, apart from these unlikely scenarios, all cycles would disappear in an economic system in which banks operated based on the three principles we have discussed. The third advantage of the proposed system is that it is the most in tune with property rights. I am not going to dwell on this. We have already covered it in detail. Property rights are essential to the healthy, sustainable functioning of a market economy. If the rules of property law are violated, a host of extremely damaging effects appear. In fact, the book is devoted precisely to an examination, within the specific sphere of banking, of the effects which have resulted from a privilege granted only to certain economic agents bankers, who are thus allowed to operate without regard to the demands of property law concerning the deposit. In other words, they are allowed to operate with a fractional reserve ratio. The fourth advantage of the proposed model is that it promotes stable, sustainable economic growth, and thus drastically reduces market transaction costs, and specifically the strains of labor negotiations. Furthermore, it fosters economic development. Keep in mind that over the centuries, the worldwide stock of gold has grown by around 1 or 2% per year. It is very rigid. As I have mentioned before, all of the gold in the world would fit into 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So the stock of gold expands only very slowly, at a rate of 1 or 2% a year, and does not contract. With gold, monetary deflation is impossible. With a gold standard system and a 100% reserve requirement, if the economy grew by around 2 or 3% per year, since the money supply would grow by around 1 or 2%, we would be living in a society in which, to give us an idea, prices in general would tend to fall by around 1, 1.5 or 2% a year over time. Though it is true that I do not like to talk in this manner, because prices vary a great deal in relative terms. This scenario is highly favorable, because with the same nominal income, wages and all other market income, if what we buy each year were to cost us 1 or 2% less automatically, without any need for union pressure on companies, without having to go through the embarrassment of asking our bosses for a raise, but just automatically every year via that healthy price deflation which springs from a rise in productivity and not from a monetary contraction, then abundance would spread among all economic agents, and each year we would notice a 1, 1.5 or 2% rise in the purchasing power of the monetary units in which we received our wages and other income. Thus, one great advantage of this system is that, through productivity-based deflation, it extends the benefits of economic development to everyone. Also, it is a rigid system that prevents the contractions which are now so painful and exert such a profound effect on the economy, just as credit, and hence the money supply, expanded like an accordion during the bubble stage. Now, in the financial crisis, they are contracting like an accordion, and there is a process of monetary deflation, a credit squeeze, or mancamento della credenza, as expressed by the chroniclers of the Florentine crises in the 14th and 16th centuries. Such a credit squeeze would not be conceivable in the proposed system. The fifth advantage is that this system would put an end to feverish financial speculation and its damaging effects. We have gotten used to living in manic-depressive economies, and the bubble stage of the cycle is very demoralizing to economic agents. In a bubble stage, it seems possible to become a millionaire without any effort, and that is devastating, especially to the young. Remember the old saying, Spain is the country where it is easiest to get rich quickly. Well, this approach does away with all the habits associated with disciplined work, effort and saving. It ignores the harsh reality and great cost of earning our bread honestly. In fact, during the bubble period, it seems that if we speculate, if we purchase a stock certificate and just sit on it, the price will shoot up month by month. And the same for an investment in bricks. And everyone is happy. Yet we know that impression is utterly false, because it stems from an artificial monetary binge, and its days are numbered. Thus, it is very important to permanently eradicate this way of thinking, because it totally demoralizes and corrupts the entire population. An economy based on the principles we defend would be a relatively cold economy, in which development would occur in a consolidated and sustainable manner, without stages of euphoria followed by stages of severe depression. The sixth advantage of the system is that it reduces the economic functions of the state to a minimum, and in particular permits the elimination of the central bank. Remember that the central bank has emerged historically as a lender of last resort, and that it has actually been demanded by private bankers themselves, who every X number of years realize they need someone to bail them out, and so they demand the creation of a central bank. Bank customers also request it, because they see their deposits are in danger, and they might wish to withdraw them and find them gone. Everyone cries out for a lender of last resort. As a result, it has also been necessary for the central bank to be able to inject the required liquidity in times of trouble. Since it could not do this with gold, the next step once the error in Peel's Bank Act had been committed was the elimination of the gold standard and its replacement by a purely fiduciary system, a paper currency. Otherwise, the central bank would not have been able to create the desired liquidity whenever necessary. Well, all of this logic would be irrelevant in a system based on a 100% reserve ratio. There would no longer be any need for a central bank, because there would be no financial crises, and hence we would be spared the central bank, this financial central planning agency, with its thousands of civil servants who seek to constantly fine-tune monetary policy. The results of their efforts are clear. Therefore, one of the great advantages of the proposed system is that it would enable us to eradicate state intervention, public agencies, and central banks. The seventh advantage of the proposed system is that it is the most democratic. One of the things that most corrupt democracy is the possibility of financing public spending via the inflation tax, without citizens deliberately voting on such spending. Inflation is like a drug that makes citizens oblivious, at least in the short and medium term, to the true cost of what the authorities are doing. With a pure gold standard and a 100% reserve requirement, the state could spend only what it had already collected in taxes. And with such a stable and solvent monetary system, citizens would take great care when it came to voting on spending projects. This is particularly significant in the areas of international relations and armed conflicts. This brings us to the eighth advantage, which is nothing to sneeze at. The proposed system fosters peace among nations. War and inflation have always gone hand in hand, and a great scholastic from the Spanish Golden Age, Father Juan de Mariana, studied this phenomenon in detail. In fact, even from an economic standpoint, wars are very popular, because when there is a war or an armed conflict, the state rushes to finance the costs of armament, with inflation through credit expansion, and this gives rise, at least initially and on the surface, to a false sense of enormous prosperity. Indeed, it has often been written that the United States got out of the Great Depression thanks to World War II. What a disgraceful notion. It is as if war were a God-given blessing that offered us a way out of any economic crisis or depression. And what about the dead? What about the destruction? The thing is that wars are financed by inflation, and that way citizens are kept from noticing their cost, especially at first. The main goal of any pacifist, and I am one, should be to redesign the financial system based on the proposed principles, because that would discourage any war adventurism that could be financed by inflation.